Hi guys, it's Ryan and it's another Kosmoflot video, although it's not the one I thought it would be. So as of writing, March 1st, I was waiting for Corvus Belli's in February update to announce the next lot of Kosmoflot units. However, they announced Rim Racer instead, which I guess is neat, but not what I thought it'd be, so I guess the Kosmoflot purchase guide is going to be waiting until at least post-Adepticon, or even later, which is a bit of a shame. So instead we're going to talk about 8 Kosmoflot lists that I think are worth running and talking about. I know in my past videos I've done about 5 to 7 lists, but I think Kosmoflot has a lot of breadth with it, so I think it's worth discussing the breadth of these lists beyond take 2 bears and win. Rambling aside, remember if you like my content, like and subscribe for more. So the first list I'm showing today is the so-called classical list. Why is it called that? Because I looked at Kosmoflot lists and built something that wasn't quite meta, what was basically the skeleton of all other Kosmoflot lists. So, looking at the list, why is it so classical? Well, basically it contains a pretty stock way to play the sectorial, in that you have your midfield in your SAS and paracommandos, a solo piece in the bear, a regular of course, a rocket core because that's our line infantry, and a very strong unknown ranger, Patcher Varangian Haris, which is pretty meta, but to be honest it adds a lot to the list in terms of aggressiveness and really good shooting. It also brings 2 good close assault pieces. Like most if not all of my lists, this is an all-comer style list and can do a lot of missions pretty well thanks to a good range of specialists, except hackers with a lot of guys that can do combat really well. So let's talk about our shooters. First off is our Vokalat core with a missile launcher, mechanic mine layer and 3 rockets as a base. First of all, it's a pure link core, so that's +3 ballistic skill, so we're looking at BS-13 rockets, BS-14 mechanic, and importantly a BS-15 and a Phys-17 for its grenades Vokalat missile launcher. This is importantly a burst 2 missile launcher on a 2 wound state with total immunity and arm 4, or arm 7 in cover, which is pretty much he always will be, and that's pretty damn near immutable. This is a very hard piece to shift, and while it's generally outshot, it's very hard to kill. Heavy machine guns are looking for 9s or lower to wound, which is pretty much a coin flip in your favour. Explosives on DA and even viral whiffs it down to 1 saving throw thanks to immunity, but with no vulnerability to viral. Although watch for those BTS attacks because they are truly very few at long ranges. The core is specifically built to get the most out of the piece itself and be very tough to peel away. The paramedic is pretty much guaranteed to pick up the Vokalat thanks to its Phys-14 on 2 dice. If the Vokalat gets spotlit, he'll ignore forward observer, or you get fart magic isolated or jammed, the engineer is whip 13 to walk up and just touch him better. That same engineer brings EM mines to block off and slow down infiltrators that would want to seek out and bring down this fire team. Additionally, everyone is very strong within 8 inches thanks to tons of SMGs and an unholy amount of grenades. I don't know why rockets have grades on them other than having a 7-point SMG is Caledonia cheap, and I don't think that's what Corvus Belli wanted here. The Vokalat himself is pretty solid in close range with burst 2 small templates or 3 in his fire team, 2 grenades on 17s and 3 heavy pistol shots if absolutely required. Finally, the big thing I keep forgetting about, he's CC22 and Natural Born Warrior, so if you want to melee him, he'll 1 ignore your CCW's ammunition, which let's be honest is one of the saving graces of close combat, then 2, he'll ignore your martial arts. I mean, yeah, Fide will kill your squishy guys, but he will die trying to kill a bunch of 9-point models, while the 40-point model is beyond fine. Final note is that the Volk has super jump, so if you need to get good odd angles on people, you can absolutely just do that, as he can bound up a story or 2 and just blast something in the building or on the building. Absolutely nothing is safe. This exact core is just so effective and cheap that yeah, you can add patchers or HMGs for more active attacks that move up, but as is, it just works. And the rocket core features in 6 of the 8 lists here today. Can you have another reactive fire team? Sure, but it won't be as intimidating or tough. The next shooter in the list is the unknown ranger Varangian Patcher Haris. This is basically the competitive Haris for him, and for good reason. With min -3, MSV1 and an AP Spitfire, which what is now burst 5, this can deal with a lot of different and difficult pieces. It also brings along 2 very good close range pieces that can screen for him if absolutely necessary, and can smoke out fire lanes or lob grenades if you need to deal with rooms or whatever. This isn't as synergistic as the core, but to be honest, it doesn't need to be. The only thing it needs to do is make the good shooter better. Yes, your opponent will try to burst it down, but at the same time, if you can make that difficult, then they will not enjoy seeking it out. Close range sucks as well, because between the 6 templates in reactive, or the 2 very good CCers getting into melee, there are some specialists in this Haris, so once you're in optimal range for the Unknown Ranger and the killing has stopped, you can get the Unknown Ranger or the Patcher to push a button and get some points. What I do like about Kosmoflot is that yes, the core is very good, burst 5 AP with MSV is so good, but you can easily just not run the Unknown Ranger and make this Haris something else. If you're like me, a meta contrarian, it's a total of 78 points, which easily could be a Scots Guard, Stranic, Frontovlik, or 2 Frontovliks, Stranic, or Wallace, Varanging, Volk, or maybe even a Soldat link. You've got options. Kosmoflot has such amazing breadth beyond this, and I feel like I'm bad for saying that this is our classical list, and it's almost a little lazy on my part. From one solid option to the next, it's the Impetuous Bear. Like most, if not all, Kosmoflot lists will have a bear or equipping Mirage 5, and yeah, what can I say except it's proper terrifying warband unless you rock a lot of viral breaker and MSV, which is a rare combo. Why is it terrifying? Well, if you don't know, go ask your local Infinity player, watch them have flashbacks to the time it tanked 15 shots in a turn, then killed their entire backline and their mother on the reactive turn. Yes, I have heard a couple of stories like that, but not the matricide bit. It's 3 wound states, 2 true wounds with Dogged, arm 5 with total immunity, so a bit better than the Volk, but with a lot less range, and is unfortunately weak to viral, but it's still really hard to take down. In this configuration, he has smoke grenades to contest shots on 19s, and then a damage 16 AP shotgun to shoot 17s within 8, or 2 small templates with the same damage, which is really nice. Surprisingly, this is the one I keep hearing about how people keep dying to this and not Berserk, which is pretty fair. Shotgun and chain rifles are absolutely brutal when you get to close range. It is still deadly in melee with damage 18 or DA, or you can throw the hammer on 19s within 8 for damage 16 DA, which is hilarious, and I'm willing to bet people forget about it all the time. It's only burst 1, but still. So yeah, the bear is a massive distraction and hammer for your list. Just smartly navigate him up the board and absolutely demolish your opponent. If you're smart and don't just unga-bunga him up the board and use the Volt Missile Launcher and Unknown Ranger to snipe out things that give your bear hassle, then you will obviously have a much easier time. Okay, now into something familiar to me as a Caledonia player, the midfield control. We have the SAS. 2, of course, a Cataran who is more of control of the midfield from the drop zone, and the Paracommando Forward Observer bordering shotgun. Each one of the 3 profiles have a different job beside just murder things. They can zone out areas well and push objectives, but each separately. First is the SAS. Go watch my Caledonia stuff for me to gush about them. They're 21 point Camel -3 skirmishers who can push buttons, defend it with templates, flash pulse as a meme, or even forward observer on 13s, which is all nice. They have another purpose. Say it's turn 2 or 3, your opponent has this fat, heavy infantry in the midfield near objective, a cheeky Haris, something without MSV or 6th Sense. It's pretty fairly common. Your SAS can walk up in camo and give that fat, juicy point sack, -6 to close combat you back, or a -9 if they shoot you, and just bat it to death with what is canonically a fucking war axe carrying on 15s, or you can use plastic explosives to do the same thing. Of course it will probably die doing this, so don't be stupid when you decharge through someone, but keep it in mind as another tool in your tool belt to clear off opponents from objectives. Cam markers essentially give you a free move or move attack before being flattened, because oh boy, the SAS are squishy. So this funny example aside, the SAS as cam markers can lock down a solid zone of control bubble without 6th Sense and take objectives to win the game if used correctly. Catarans are another scalpel in this list that, thanks to range bangs, climbing plus and camo -3 one use with surprise attack, you can pick your targets and put a good shot into them to just give them with the T2 sniper rifle. They are not really sandbag units like the War Core and the Raven Eye, although you can do that if need be. However, they're more like warbands with the sniper rifle. Go see any of my recent Kosmoflot videos for more on that. But what this means is that for this list, it's a proactive piece that hunts vanilla list or fire teams that lack visors and 6th Sense that have become a little too overzealous. You can very quickly put them at a -12 to hit you or a -3 to dodge, which might be enough for your 212s. It really is easy to pop at them at bad angles and really leverage him, and impressively just using that irregular order. This means you can then spend maybe this order and one Group 2 irregular order to do a surprising amount of damage, and if he goes down, does it matter? He's 21 points, and Group 1 is where it's all popping. Yeah, so I really rate Catarans. Use him alongside a Volcalat to snipe out things that could give the bear a hard time and protect the midfield. Finally in this list is the Paracommando. Again, I'm not a fan of airborne deployment troopers, but I want that to change. I really wanted the AP Spitfire one, but the points didn't work, or maybe the rifle if it had spec ops. Anyway, his job is twofold. You come in at awkward angles to blast things with a boarding shotgun, flashball, or even forward observe them, so something like the Unknown Ranger can then blast them easier. You can do that easily with Ballistic Skill 12, Whip 14 and Min -3, and it will be a damage 14 AP, which if you get within the back art of something, can be absolutely devastating. If you hit them from outside 8 inches, there's no reaction to them, but if you hit them from within, they may still get a dodge. The second thing you can do with the Paracommando is come out later in the game and steal an objective if your SAS and other specialists have perished or your opponent has stolen it into a defensible position. Paracommando allows for a midfield pivot to focus on new angles and really force your opponent to sweat. Yes, your opponent might see him coming turn 1, but turn 2 or 3, will they really remember it once they have a bear, Unknown Ranger and a Cataran just picking away at them? Overall, this list has a lot of good pieces going on and can really give your opponent a lot of issues from a good few angles. It's not immune to everything. Min -6 shooters, templates and viral can destroy this list. But good spacing, guided missile launchers will struggle, and hacking can literally only spotlight you except the patcher. Okay, this is basically our meta list. You can tell because it's terribly uninspired. Well, no, it's inspired and well thought out, but I don't think it's astounding from a list building perspective. This isn't the exact meta list. I think this is either mine or someone else's tweaks on it, but honestly, it's more or less the same, but just moved around. A Vault Core, an Unknown Ranger Haris, 2 Bears, and Uxa. Some versions use Wallace, and for all those irregular orders, but I think that's the flavouring to the main stock of this list. We have the Vault Core from earlier. Before I started adding it to all my lists, it was getting used everywhere, and it's still good. Same points apply for above, and that's the same with the Unknown Ranger Haris. The Bear Pod is again the same as above, but Group 2 is where it starts to get really funky. Well, the less obvious things out the road first. 2 SAS is the same as before, and I can only guess the Tractor Mule here for another regular order. This is all fairly standard, which is why it's the meta list, of course. You want something reliable and dependable, and this is all very much that. So where does the spice get added? Because there are similar lists with very little to no spice. Well, I think I've danced around the bear in the room and the angry Glaswegian for long enough. This is a 2 bear list, and in Group 2 we have our second bear, and it is the regular one. The Polaris team may not be as feared as the Impetuous Bear, but it is still a terror. It has all the good stuff of the bear, except for that extra order, but instead it can pass its order onto things like Uxia, which is very nice. It also gains a larger template and grenade, so it hits on 19s, which is, again, really nice. It also opens up spec firing on 13s over walls with an 8 or 10s out width, which is another tool that can be absolutely used to devastating effect. He is still arm 5 and can take cover, which means he's arm 8 and toll immune. So like the Volcalat, he becomes hard to shift. This drastically alters the list, or well, the fact that we have 3 total immune monsters with 6 to 8 wounds between them, depending on how you cut it. Which means if your opponent wants to breathe, they will have to chunk through so much, and it's not like they can just play around them. No, one will watch a lane till its death or proactively hunt things on rooftops. One can aggressively smoke up the board and hunt things on rooftops or butcher things with the shotgun, or its massive CC damage. The final one can just pick a point and cover to threaten and control a massive template zone around itself while it becomes either a glacier to move. This helps in zone control missions, kill missions, and to some extent button putting missions if you park a bear near it and clear it out and let an SAS just walk up and push the button. The final aforementioned Kosmoflot All-Star is the Uxia McNeil, the fire-bellied SAS. In this list she is here to deploy as far forward as possible, find the squishy underbelly of your opponent's list, then very quickly murder those problematic pieces. Well, watch my unit breakdown, but the profile is wild. CC 22, Martial Arts 2, Surprise Attack -3. Same as the SAS, but it's that infiltration +6 that makes her an absolute proactive murder menace rather than waiting for something fat and plump to come along. She knows Decharge Fu alongside her named machete, and that +1 burst assault pistol for when you really want to win the face-to-face roll. So with her you can either pick an obvious lieutenant, a strong link piece, or a dangerous tag. You take her, smoke or camo up to the target, then you CC or shotgun it to death and cripple a list before they can even start. She is the missile strike before the bear assaults. She is not likely to live through turn 1, but if you're sensible and pick your fights, then she can do a lot of damage to win the game. This list absolutely epitomizes the aggression and bulkiness required of some parts of the Infinity meta. Infinity is a very lethal game, and with a list like this, you take units that aren't going to die easy to slow down your opponent, these hyper-aggressive units, to hammer into them and cripple lists. This list, or well like it, is one of the reasons Kosmoflot is widely regarded as a fantastic sectorial. It can't be a list video without a tag, and oh boy don't we have a tag. The Chernobog is a great 72 point or 65 point tag, so we can take that and bring a couple of engineers to support it and let it go wild. So this list covers most things a tag will need except hackers and a midfield repeater presence to protect it from other hackers. We'll get on to the tag itself in a second, but we're seeing a lot from the last list, but we're also using it a bit differently. Uxia is here to kneecap your opponent, but her target priority is different. Here, rather than dealing with potentially harmful links, we're instead looking to deal with things that will cause issue to our tag. So, this will be anything with a hacking device, picture, or repeater of any kind. If you can kneecap their lieutenant, or find any anti-tank weapon that isn't linked, or Sixth Sense, or 2 dug in, then kill that as well. Pick your tool and use it to make your life easier for your tag. If it's dug in, then the Volk or the tag will deal with it. The lesser Uxias, the 2 SAS, have a similar sort of secondary objective here as well. If they are positioned for it, they are stealthy camo markers that can hunt down repeaters in the midfield, such as Morans, or drop pictures. We shouldn't waste too many orders or really any on it unless it blocks your path, or if you nab an objective on the way. Then blast the repeater with your shotgun or chain rifle, then that's always a bonus. Primarily, the tag should be dealing with threats while your SAS steal objectives. Also, just make sure they can cover the tag if need to. The regular bear makes his return, and honestly, they're here to hunt midfield PCs and repeaters, or skirmishers like the SAS and Shavasti nerds who will threaten your SAS and tags. Plus, if your opponent comes at you with a tag, you can use your fake tag to take out their tag, so your real tag can run riot. They're also a big target that if your opponent isn't savvy, will spend too much time on. They're also a way to take out things your tag cannot deal with, such as min -6 or high ballistic skill. So that's our tag's active support. What about the passive or reactive support for our tag? Well, it's our Armandinos, Dozer, and to a lesser extent, Mechanic. The Dozer is the primarily tag healer fixer with a gizmo kit and a helper bot. It also contains a Blitzen to tangle with it in case the tag gets total controlled. That's not a good plan, don't rely on it. But yeah, he's here to repair it on Whip 13 if it goes down. But here's the question that's important to the list. When do I repair the Chernobog? Well, the Chernobog, before I get into it, is a degrading tag, and that's the devil's bargain we pay for the high-tech stuff. You could repair it before it degrades, and it has 2 structures in its first rate, but without Rem Press or Whip 14 or higher engineers, it's likely that one failed engineering roll will cause the Chernobog to degrade, and I'd rather not have that happen because of my botched roll. I want my opponent to do it for me, because then he's wasting his precious orders. It might be more worth it to use Burst 2 Gizmo kits, but that requires passing 1 or more ballistic skill rolls, then passing 1 or more physical 9 rolls, which is not likely to happen. So in general, I don't heal on that first bracket. How honestly, I think it's better to bring it back from unconscious, because I think it's better value going from no tag to crap tag than good tag to maybe good tag with more HP, but also with the chance of making it the bad tag. If it fails, nothing more is lost than the order because of your tag was already dead. With this in general, I think using engineers on your Chernobog is just much better than using gizmo kits, purely because of that Fizz equals 9, which sucks a lot. So kind of big tangent on healing the tag aside is that the Armandino also has a helper bot and an engineer and is Whip 13. Should he be healing the tag? Yes, but also no. One of the recommended pieces of advice to help mitigate the effects of total control is having a helper bot in contact with the tag, so you can sandbag it with a para CCW, which the electronic is good at here. The Armandino can also move up and keep up with the electronic in contact with the tag if need be, and can heal it maybe quicker than the Dozer Mechanic. However, I mainly see this duo as being actually a nice little offensive warband piece to run in and use the 2 of them to kill something with Burst 2 D charges, which will crumple most things in melee. Yes, it is CC21 with no martial arts or natural born warrior, but it is also Burst 2 with a +1 tet, so that's pretty good. prime targets for this are camo markers, as you can burst 2, one on whip 13, one on whip 12, discover things, which is super useful. You can push objectives with the Armandino, and in general for 10 points it's not a bad piece to be in the midfield with. It's likely to keep up with the tag thanks to the free impetuous order and using its own irregular order to get 16 inches of movement if you're unopposed, which if you focus on moving the EM bot shouldn't be too hard to keep up with the tag. Importantly to note, the bot cannot gain cover as the Armandino is impetuous, and thus the bot is also considered technically irregular too, but it's a peripheral so it doesn't really matter. So yes, the Armandino is your secondary engineer, but also is a fantastic mine clearer, hacker killer, or hell tag killer if you smoke well enough. Right, finally let's talk about the Chernobog. I know we really sort of talked about the support for the tag, and it's a big thing in the list, and we should talk about how it affects the rest of the list. I don't know if it can come across well, but everything so far in this list has two purposes: to support the tag and do its own thing, and that's the beauty of Kosmoflot, is that they can do all this and synergize to help get the job done. So why do we want to support a tag? Well, the Chernobog is the hammer of our list, main source of our burst, and does so at BS 14, arm 8 and damage 16 AP, which means it will crack everything except a Vostok and maybe an Avatar, or whatever, but that's fine. It should be able to take on links and things your SAS, Bear and Voklat may not want to deal with. It's basically immune to small arms fire thanks to its high armor, so anything without AP is fair game, and anything without explosive or DA is in a similar boat. Burst is king, and so is high damage and AP. More dice is more failures for opponent and more successes for you, so it's really nice. It's a wad of points to control zone and contains templates including continuous damage rockets. So if your opponent has cover and is being a pain, just layer 3 pie dishes and hope the continuous damage burninates him. The Chernobog is requiring a lot of support to just be a hammer, but nothing else in this meta besides bears competes with tags. They are a mainstay for a reason. Fortunately, we have a pilot tag with whip 13, which is as good as 99% of our other specialists, who can just push a button, which while not necessary can be absolutely helpful. You can use the tag to block line of fire to do so if you want, and you don't mind getting straight in combat as soon as you get back into the tag, if someone was being sneaky. To wrap up, the list allows the Chernobog to push up, with the rest of the list doing missions or clearing threats, so your Chernobog can have an outsized threat to your opponent. So this list is largely the same as before and is another Chernobog, but I wanted to show it for two reasons. One, we have a hacker and repeater and we might as well talk about it before it disappears with ITS 14, and two, it's a full list and then there's also a tag. Although we are missing the bear. Swapping the hacker and mule for a regular bear would essentially finish the job. Difference, no dozer, so we're really relying on the Armandino to fix the tag, which is also now the cheaper version. We have two mules, one with guided for some reason, I swear, beyond I had 9 points to spare. A Kosmoflot Haris, which is our secondary attack piece, just to deal with some things, mostly pushing buttons. I think I was point shy for the AP sniper, but we'll chat about that in a minute. Finally, we have the war driver with a hacking device, so I guess to zone stuff out and total control our tag back to us. So the least important change is the Kosmoflot Haris of an AP Spitfire Frontobelic, NCO Scots Guard and a Stranic Doctor. Why does this exist? Well, this is our secondary mobile gun piece and really to show the flexibility of the Kosmoflot fire team. Why not just the Unknown Ranger, Patcher, Varangian? Well, that's boring and this fire team has a lot more flexibility. Just glancing at this, you could swap the AP Spitfire Frontobelic to the Scots Guard one for a point cheaper and more armour. You could swap it to the AP Sniper to get far more range and MSV into this list. You could swap the fire team into Group 1 to get even more orders. But really the fire team is here to shoot, steal buttons and split focus from the tag. I really like this Haris when I ran it in Highlander, which was a lower point level, but it showed me that we have other options. The NCO is really great on the Scots Guard and means that we aren't wasting orders, so this list has a total of 18 orders a turn thanks to tactical awareness on the tag and the ITS bot and the NCO and the Scots Guard. The fact that we have a full core Haris and tag is what is great about Kosmoflot, since everything's so damn cheap. Well, maybe not the Frontobelics, but that's debatable. In general, if you're using this list, flip the Haris about to see what it can give you and maybe put a Fronty Engineer to follow your tag and pick it up if need be. But don't underestimate that BS12 Min-3 Armor 2/3 shooter. So, the guided bot. I think when I built this, it was becoming a kind of joke that since I had a hacker and a repeater, Ariadne cannon to guided missile strikes. But we do also have two decent forward observer pieces in the Scots Guard and SAS, but also the mule is whip 12, so it's not awful. If I was remaking this list, I would probably just make the Haris cheaper so I can swap this bot out for a Varangian or the TR bot, or literally something better than a DA guided bot. Please, Corvus Belli, just make it a missile launcher and the Urgan bot a HMG. Finally, the main reason I'm showing off this list is the tractor mill. The I2 can be a sensor bot for a season. Note, it doesn't actually have sensor. Also the war driver as well. So here's the plan. We use the tactical awareness on the mule to follow the tag up the board and defend it with suppressive fire, templates, its zone of control repair, and maybe forward observe or spotlight something that tries to sneak into close combat with the tag. Additionally, if the tag turns evil, then it will have to deal with this absolute chonker of a buddy bot with Arm 2 and Rem Press, while a friendly hacker tries to possess it back or isolates it. The hacker is also low-key really good. Why? Well, it's Whip 13 BTS 3, so basic I can hack, but it's also got native 6th Sense, so you can just solo it, and it can still take on stealth. Maybe even spotlighting them for a guided missile strike later if they don't camo or marker up. Hilariously, you could move the mule into zone of control of another tag and steal it. If you've managed that, please let me know. That sounds hilarious. So yeah, it's a different take on the tag list, but I think it's worthwhile to consider a different Chernobog list in Kosmoflot. So this is a completely different structure from my other lists, but it should be familiar if you've seen my list litmus test video. It's a fun idea I had to make the star of the list a Soldat Haris. Mostly because I think he's neat, the slightly less good son of the Mormare, but still really effective in his own right. Here he's supported by a full Haris of an engineer and a doctor to make sure he stays alive and do other stuff. We'll talk about that in a second. We also use the SAS and Paracommando to win points and kill stuff the Soldat can't deal with. We lack MSV in this list, but honestly, that could be added in, but we'd lose the burst. Really, a good addition to this list would be a second solo source of burst. The Unknown Ranger would work well here, and I know the argument is to then just Haris him instead, but we're avoiding that here. The Soldat is the star of the show. Moving back to summarising the list, the 112 acts as a mobile doctor and objective stealer. Armandinos and Varangian do what they do best, which is unga bunga up the board, smoking and meleeing is required. And the bear acts as a bullet magnet while everything else does more important stuff to win. Wallace is my LT, which I think is the only one in this video, but I think he's pretty useful here for a few reasons, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the Soldat Haris is kind of interesting. If we could core him, he would be in a core in this list. Even if it was the Kosmoflot fire team, I'd occasionally run the core. Maybe as a paint train with 2 Soldats. But we don't have that. Instead, we have a Haris duo option, like the other S5 tanky heavy infantry in Ariadna. It's a bit more limited to wildcards and frontovlics, but fortunately the wildcards in Kosmoflot are really good, and the Stranic is a godsend here for doctoring for cheap. You could do a Patcher and a Fronty Paramedic, or you could do an Unknown Ranger and a Stranic Doctor. There are surprisingly a good few options here. All fairly expensive though, but this Haris was never going to be cheap. The cheapest Haris you can make is 76 points, and the cheapest duo 57 points, which is some combination of the Spec Ops Soldat and one of the cheaper Stranics. So in this list, what I've gone for is AP HMG Soldat, although against Mimetism, the MSV1 portable autocannon option is better, so it's burst versus quality. A frontovlic engineer to fix our hackable heavy infantry, get classifieds, light rocket launcher a fire team, or decharge a console. The availability one frontovlic here adds a lot to the fire team, especially with the wildcard doctoring duties being done elsewhere. The Stranic Doctor does the medkitting and doctoring to pick up the Soldat when he drops. Although with the Soldat's no wound in cap, it's not 2 true wounds, so you got to be smart when using the Stranic. And you have to guess when it's better to go NWI over unconscious, and if it's worth risking the heal. I still think it's worth having him here anyway, especially as he is a proper specialist, and that means some bonuses on certain missions like supplies. He also rocks a flash pulse, which is nice, and covers the 0 to 8 inch range band. The Soldat and the frontovlic may be better at 0 to 8 with AP heavy pistol and assault pistol respectively, but it's always worth having him, especially since he does the whole doctor thing to free up the frontovlic from being a paramedic. Although we could do the AP sniper frontovlic and the pack Soldat Haris. Anyone? The downside of the specific iteration of the fire team means it's slow, and that's just one of our problems. It's the only real gun in the list, which is not great, and we could change that by adding the Chernobog or a Vault Core. There is room in this list for experimentation, and I've kind of marled around with it, but it is still an experimental list. Fortunately, this kind of offset by Wallace in a solid midfield. The Haris are your main objective grabbers, the guys you move to steal a zone or take a supply box or make sure your enemy doesn't approach you. It's also your problem solver as it's able to tangle and win against links and tags. Why? Well, it's damage 16 AP with burst 5, which is absolutely nothing to sneeze at. Funnily enough, our Chernobog is in the same area. You know who also else is? Literally every other main battle tag in the game. The Soldat is also just a chunky boy with arm 6, which is light tag level, so if you lose the fight outside of armor piercing, you should be fine. Rifles will need a 5+ to succeed in cover. With AP, that's still an 8+. The downside is you're BS 13, but the small footprint is really good for the fire team, and you're still fairly mobile, so getting good range is not very hard on a good board. This list will struggle on more open maps, but that's where a Volklat missile launcher in front of like AP sniper rifle in the Haris could seriously help out. The AP sniper is weaker but technically the better shooter with MSV1 and min-3. Really, this list could be reworked to include the standard Vault core and remove Wallace, but this was an attempt to try something radically different, and really that would just be one list with a different Haris. The 112 motorized is a personal favourite of mine and included in the list for 2 reasons. 1, fast specialists to steal, and 2, fast medkit to medkit things that need it. Primarily the Haris if someone is dying, Wallace because he actually has a cube, and the Bear. Literally everything else in this list is semi or fully disposable. But really he's here for the first one. With his own smoke and the smoke of the warband, he should be able to move quickly to grab a supply box and run away very fast. They can now take cover and have min-3, which is nice, but it's a shame he doesn't have more than armor 0 and a light shotgun. Honestly, I believe I can make this work, I just suck with the big bases. I've talked about the Armandinos earlier, so we'll move on to the Varangians, who are here to warband up the board and provide 2 regular orders, 1 each. It's not terribly complex, but are warbands complex? Maybe. I have a video idea on that one. They're here to give the SAS and Paracommando orders to do their things, be it steal objectives or shotgun someone in the back. Additionally, they are our problem solvers who are here to trade up as big as possible. Min-6 cores or squishy ARO PCs getting you down, just unga bunga up the board and layer a cake slice on him. Or berserk something that costs a lot of point and watch it eat 2 AP damage 14 saves because the Varangian is liable to crit. If you need to cover in advance or just place a bunch of smoke for your 112 to ride up the board and pick up points. Wallace needed to be in a list somewhere, and while it could have been a better list for him, I feel like he doesn't need a full paragraph to understand how to get the most out of Wallace. Take Wallace, take as many regular orders as you're comfortable taking, then profit. I will, however, spend a paragraph about why he is in this list and why it's the right choice. Well, it probably was. So, why Wallace? Well, the old version of this list had more irregular orders, so there was that, but he converts the few irregular orders to regular to help assist the Soldat as much as possible. Wallace is largely here for that, but also with the goal to win the lieutenant role with 15s. He's obviously your lieutenant, so lean into that, and hide him until turn 2 or 3, where him dying in assault doesn't matter. You could take a Zenit, which gives him more range and burst 3 in this list, but you'd need to find the point somewhere. This list is more Wallace and Soldat than Soldat, Wallace and friends. If I was to remake another Soldat and Wallace list, I'd restructure it a lot. I do have one with the Chernobog, but I'm not too happy with it, and we're pushing it for time on this list anyway. So where am I using this list? Well, I'm not too sure. I tried it in supplies and it worked fairly well, but I feel like this should work in midfield heavy games, since the Bear and the Soldat are hard to shift. SAS, Rock and the Warband will just hold off the midfield, so missions like supplies, acquisition, firefight, frostbite, frontline, you sort of get the idea. It's not great at room objectives, but a small tweak can solve that. Overall, this is more of a fun second list for a tournament or a beer and pretzels game. I wanted an Equipping Mirage 5 list for this video, and this is it. It was very nearly a double bear list and Equipping Mirage 5, but I opted for a more normal list, if that exists. It's back to our pre-stock list with a Vault core with a Forward Observer rocket instead. I didn't build this list, I'll come clean. I think it was trash panned on Discord, so my usual 2 skirmishers aren't here. But it's still pretty meta with the Unknown Ranger Haris, Uxia, a bear, and a Volklat core. But rather than the irregular bear doing a lot of damage, you instead have Equipping Mirage 5, power dropping in, and doing what needs to be done. So, since we lack more midfield presence, Uxia and the Armandinos have a slightly different objective set, in that Uxia is still here to kill things, but if she can pick up an objective, that would be really helpful. Armandinos is the same as the Chernobog list, except there's nothing for him to heal. It's 10 points, grab an objective and hide, or suicide him into something you don't like. The Unknown Ranger Haris is going to pull double duty as an actual objective grabber rather than just butchering, since we lack a lot of midfield presence, but that's fine. This Haris is pretty strong in the midfield, and in general, if piloted right, this Haris will hand you the game. So this list is very killy, and to be honest, EM5 takes it up to 11. I had to double check if they are specialists. Nope, they're pure murder on both profiles, and really that's what Margot and Duroc do. They slide into your opponent's DZ or half or wherever you need them and just start blasting. I feel like this list is more for fire for mind wipe, since you can pop an objective then come in and smack the HVT or something that is overextended itself. I explain how they work in my list video, but one comes in and murders the right bits so the next one can come in and do even more carnage. Margot can come in first to shotgun, rifle or grenade someone with MSV, so Duroc can come in to smoke up the joint and then template or CC something that you don't necessarily have an answer to. Or you come in with Duroc, smoke up the joint, force something into melee, then have Margot come in and shoot things on 14 to kill other things. That's right, we have Miss Panoceania with that native ballistic skill. So she just rocks up and pew-pews problems away. EM5 is the ultimate symbol of Ariadne's asymmetrical hammering. It is truly an iconic piece. You take them to cripple your opponent and then use the rest of the list to win. So can it be a list video without a pain train? I say no, so we're doing one. This list is built around my idea for a pain train with the Kosmoflot fire team. The ones with the Scots Guard and the front obliques. Or well, in this case, only one or two of its members. The concept of this list is more orders for our fire team is better, so adding NCO with a good close range model could be useful to get the core up the board. We have pretty flexible wildcards in Kosmoflot, so why not use them all in a core at once? So the Scots Guard was used here as our fire team base. I'll talk about the core itself in a second, but first the theory. Yes, this is more expensive over a Rocket, Varangian or even a Frontovlik, but I think it's worth the points as it supports the list with NCO access to AP plus explosive and being a forward observer. NCO is the key bit here though. However, the rest of the list is pretty stock. 2 SAS, Raven Eye Officer and a Bear. The Lieutenant is the Rockets again, but instead they are on their own and supported by a Rocket infiltrating camo, which you can infiltrate or hide as a fake mine to defend your lieutenants and generate some safe orders. Anyway, the rest of my list is pretty much standard. Varangians are here to screen for the fire team, berserking something that can cause them issues. The Cataran can sniper something that may outrange your fire team, something like an unlinked Lasisk or revealed camo marker that the unknown ranger can't get a good shot on, or something that has revealed and pinned the fire team in place so that any activation by them is a death sentence. We have the Bear again. He's a great distraction piece, and the option for your opponent is to let a Bear unga bunga something expensive to death, or let a unknown ranger souped up with ballistic skill 14 and burst 5 AP do it. The wrong choice here can and will cost your opponent dearly. So the core is the big thing, and it brings some of the heaviest shooters we have. But moving around a full 5-man link is not for everyone. I sort of never got that memo when I started, so I played like my first 4 or 5 games with full cores and military orders. I kinda don't mind it, but it means I find Haris nice and refreshing, but I'm still drawn to these big lots of lads. I'm going to preempt talking about this core with a don't do it if you don't feel comfortable moving it all around. However, this active core does have a big advantage. The aforementioned chunkiness. With 8 wins among 5 models, it's not the toughest core around, but it's enough to make sure that your mistakes aren't fatal. We have one toll immune 2-win model, the Voklat, with a missile launcher who will take on any ARO duty and long-range anti-armor issues. He'll be on 13s, but with the resistance he has, the lower BS is worth it. The Patchers are our anti-close range threat, although to be fair so is the Volk and the Unknown Ranger, but this guy's cheap and throws a lot of templates around. They are true wounds, degrading arm 3 close range troops, with a burst 3 large template, burst 3 para ammo rifle, and 2 continuous grenades. Means that within 16 inches, this might be the one to solve lighter or cluster issues, especially if they throw around something that could kill the Unknown Ranger. Patcher is also, alongside the Volk and Unknown Ranger, your go-to room clearer, but these guys show you how a dedicated room clearer works. 3 large templates will very quickly cover an armory or panic room, and the grenades are the same. The heavy shotgun could work in the fire team, but I think it gives up a lot for not much. The Scots Guard isn't true chunk, but he's not bad either, with a whip 13, BS 12, 13 in this fire team, min -3, forward observer, and importantly NCO. The min -3 and BS 13 means that when or if he takes a pot shot with his Panzerfaust, for some reason over the Voklat, he'll not be bad, but what importantly he's here for is to utilise that spare lieutenant order and move the fire team up the board much quicker. We have 7 orders for the team as a result, and that's before we add the rest of the group, thanks to the Unknown Ranger's tactical awareness. Basically, in practice, what I do is use the tactical awareness to run up the board and the regular orders. Then, when I'm in contact or near an objective, I can use the NCO to move the Scots Guard to get an objective. Or, if the Corps is fully in cover, I'll use the NCO to reposition the Corps so the Bear or something else can use the regular orders for its thing. The Stranic is our other weaker point, but it brings a medkit and a dedicated specialist for the Corps. We could swap the Scots Guard for a front-of-lit paramedic and change this to something with more wounds and armour, but I think that's an acceptable change to make. Really, it's here for the 19-point SMG, light, riot, stopper and medkit. The final piece of this pile of wounds and armour is the Unknown Ranger, which shouldn't be surprising. He's a fantastic piece and one of the best shooters in the game, and he adds movement to the core and burst. Spitfire ranges, but it's still good burst. Honestly, even if you're in bad ranges, it's still on 11s with burst 5, ignoring min -3 and giving that back. Not a bad idea, but it's better than nothing. The Unknown Ranger is very likely to take on most main battle tags and win in this configuration, and potentially even Combined Army and Pan-Oceanian tags will fear him. Doubly so if you can get under the tag's HMG ranges, which is hard, but if it's big if you manage it. Overall, this pain train is weak to the usual things that sort of take out fire teams like templates, but only really BTS saves. Everyone is either Phys 11 and Arm 3 or has 2 wound states. Hacking only really affects the Patchers, as the Unknown Ranger has stealth, is light infantry, and the Volk is unhackable, as are the 2 medium infantry. It's a lot of eggs in one basket, but if you think you can pilot it to success, it's something your opponent will really need to deal with, or it will cost them the game. So that was like 6 Kosmoflot lists. I really hope you enjoyed it though. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have some new ideas for playing Kosmoflot. Remember, if you liked the video, like it and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.